How are you?
I am fine.
We were
thank
talking.
You.
You live here in Chicago now? You just moved to
Yes.
Lincoln? Oh, this is fun.
Yes.
My dog would like this. And you have, I want to get the important stuff out of the way first. How many grandchildren do you have?
I have 7 grandchildren.
7 grandchildren?
1 for every day of the week.
Is that how you organize them?
That's how I organize
It's Monday, Simon. It's your turn to call. Is that how it works? Are any of them here?
Yes.
Oh.
Sitting right over there.
Hello. All 7?
No, they let me down.
Really? We'll be fine. It's not important. You're only talking about your life experience at this impressive event. It's fine. I'm sure you'll do it again someday.
Right.
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 Anyway, now that we've covered the important things, let's talk about your story. I said that you were born in Warsaw, 1929.
Yes.
Into how big a family?
Just my sister, my family of 4.
Right. And tell me about where your family lived, what your parents did.
I was born in Warsaw, Poland. Warsaw was the center of my universe and glows in my selective memory in golden radiance of lilac trees against open blue skies, sounds of good neighbors, love and trust and good.
Yeah, it was a very cosmopolitan city. It was a European capital.
It was a very cosmopolitan city, yes.
Right. And will you describe your circumstances as comfortable? Were you
middle class, comfortable?
Mm-hmm. Your father was a professional, perhaps, or
my father was a jeweler.
A jeweler? Okay.
Right.
So you were generations away from the shtetl and the Pale of Settlement. There
Yes.
was cosmopolitan, right.
Yes.
And did you consider yourself to be very Jewish? Were you conscious of yourself as a Jew?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That was my identity. Mm-hmm. And Poland, there was anti-Semitism in Poland in spite of the fact that Poland, Warsaw was my paradise.
Right. So 1939.
Yes.
The Nazis invade Poland.
Yes.
The beginning World War II. And what were your memories of those initial days? Were your family scared? Did you have a sense of danger? I mean, what was it like?
Well, it's very interesting because for a long period of time, Poland was aware that Germany invaded the Sudetenland,
right.
and
what was then Czechoslovakia.
Part of Czechoslovakia. Slogans were draped across the city saying, "We are ready, united," and children sang patriotic songs at school. There's something exciting about the idea of war.
Sure.
It wakes people up. It wakes up patriotism. There's maybe adrenaline that is charging in people. So there was an awful lot of excitement, an awful lot of fear. It was not without fear,
sure.
But nobody believes that they'll lose a war.
Right.
And I just turned 10 when my paradise was turned into an inferno.
Right.
Immediately, foreign soldiers marched on our streets, into our homes. They snapped whips. They held themselves. They said the Jewish people were greedy. Yet, like common thieves, they walked into our homes and helped themselves to whatever they wanted to. They isolated us in a tiny ghetto and built a thick wall around it, and we had to pay for it.
What's interesting to me is there was no period of time after the Nazis took over where you were allowed to fool yourself into thinking it would be okay. I mean, there was no calm before the storm. As soon as the German army came in, immediately they were looting your possessions, ordering you out of your home.
Immediately, our lives changed. My life changed beyond belief.
Okay.
All the rights were taken away from us. Books were outlawed. Schools were closed. We had no telephones, no radios, no newspapers. We couldn't reach anyone even in an emergency.
And how did your parents, I mean, being a parent myself, I wonder, how did your parents help you and your sister through this terrible experience?
You know, there's something very magical and wonderful about children. You know, I wrote a book, and the reason why I wrote the book was that I was wondering, how did my mother, my sister, and I survive? How did we survive whole? With compassion, with love for humanity, with joy of life, and life should be lived joyfully.
Yeah. And there's the book right there, and I believe it's on sale here, and you'll be signing it afterwards.
Right. And I think that in the process of writing, I found seeing the child through the eyes of an old woman I am now. I found a brave, resourceful, resilient girl.
Right.
It's amazing how children bring their own lights into their darkness.
Right. Now, you and your family and all the other Jews in Warsaw, and many other Jews who were brought in from the countryside, I know, were stuffed, more or less, into this very small area of Warsaw, which was known as the ghetto, the Warsaw Ghetto. And you know, I've read about this and I've heard about it. I mean, I grew up, I read books about it. But tell me what it was like in the ghetto. Where did you live, for example?
We were very fortunate that our apartment, the building that we lived in, was located in the area that was designated as the ghetto.
Oh, in other words, the apartment you lived in before the war. Oh, I see.
Right. So if you had a home, in a way, you had everything.
Right.
If you didn't have a home, you really had nothing.
Right.
They filled the ghetto with people, Jewish people, driven out from surrounding areas. Most people came barefoot, some without shoes on their feet, without a penny in their pockets.
Yeah.
The streets were littered with and there was also typhoid and lack of homes, lack of shelter, lack of food. Children, the streets were littered with corpses. People covered the dead bodies of children with posters saying, "Children are the holiest thing. Our children must live." And I must point out to you that even in this inferno, people in the ghetto fought morally. There was such a strong, pronounced moral resistance. Immediately, the people in the ghetto organized themselves into self-aid centers that were far-reaching, and everybody who had a little more helped their neighbors. There were kitchens. There was not a child over the age of 10 who did not participate in some ways to help the needy ones.
And what was your days like? I mean, obviously you weren't going to school, or were you?
Well,
schools?
Schools, no. What the days were filled with fear, filled also, I mentioned the magic of children's ability to hold on to them, to their inner selves and to their imaginations. We played, we rang doorbells, rang up and then dashed down the steps.
Really? You rang, I mean, they didn't have enough problems? They had the little kids coming up and ringing their doorbells?
Leave it to the spirit of the children.
Jeez.
Yeah. We put on plays.
Did you?
And the neighbors, and I describe it in my book, how the neighbors got together, and of course they wanted to see, their parents wanted to see, excuse me, their children constructively occupied. So they put on, we put on shows, plays. and you know, to own a book was an act of defiance, and many defied. It was a capital crime. You could be shot on the spot for it. Yet people all over the ghetto had hidden books, hidden libraries. My father had his stash of favorite books by Yiddish authors, by Sholem Aleichem and Sholem Asch and Peretz, nights, windows blinded with dark covers to keep our existence secret. My family sat in an invisible embrace. My father read to us. His voice flowed with cuddling, with swaddling comfort, bringing to us nuances of remote worlds. Our room was like a capsule of paradise, separating us from the curfew, deathly quiet outside.
One of the things that I think most about when I hear stories like yours or read about them is I wonder about the existence of hope. I mean, one of the things that gets you through hard times is the hope that it's going to get better.
Yes.
So what were you all in the midst of that misery hoping for? What future did you see for yourselves?
Well, it was very hard to be hopeful. In the ghetto, there was hope. And there were rumors. There were rumors, we had no newspapers, and the rumors would just circulate through the ghetto. The ghetto was awfully, awfully small.
Yeah, I think the figure I've read is that it was the size, more or less, of Grant Park here in Chicago.
Yes.
And had 400,000 people stuffed in there.
400,000 people. There were rumors that, we had no idea what was going on outside the world. It was impossible for us to imagine that only a few rabbit hops away from us, people sailed on silver lakes, children sat around tables with families. We were so isolated.
Yeah.
But there were rumors, so there was hope. But
did you hope for rescue by, say, the Soviet armies, the Allied armies? Did you have any idea that was going on?
My mother said that people who are ruling by hate cannot own the world. And so I think that there was this hope. And my mother, excuse me, also always said the world has a conscience. So I'm not sure that I believed her then.
That's a bold statement at that time in that place.
Right. She also said it in front of crematorium.
Yeah.
And she said the world has a conscience. And she said that if we are lucky enough to survive, we'll see that the children of the Nazis and their children's children will be asking them, where was your conscience? And you know what? She was right. The people in Germany are now asking these questions, and I am ever so grateful for it, because guilt is not the issue. What is important is, I think, understanding is a responsibility.
Right.
And I feel that we are all left with the legacy to understand if civilization is to progress.
Right.
And you know, I volunteer at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. And I am so grateful for their existence, because they prove that history hears, and history remembers, and we must pay attention if we are to find our way out of moral darkness.
Well, I want to ask you about that. We only have a few minutes left, but you were there during the uprising, the famous Warsaw Ghetto uprising.
Yes.
Obviously you survived. Many people didn't. Can you tell me how you survived to the end of the war? Were you in the ghetto till liberation? Were you moved to a camp, as many people were?
Okay. I was, during the Warsaw Ghetto deportations, between July 1942 and September 1942, 99% of the children were eliminated. Can you imagine a world without the sound of children, without the presence of grandmothers and grandfathers, because old people and children were among the first ones to be eliminated? So at first we had no idea that the deportations meant death. And as a result, some people did not, some people who were so famished, and some people were forced to write false letters to their families, right, inviting them to Białystok and Minsk and somewhere else where they were fed and clad. So some destitute people went.
And what really was happening was the Nazis were shipping everybody off to the camps to be killed.
Yes. We never heard from the people. Most people hid. We hid. We hid in a room obscured by a wardrobe to
right,
obscure the...
So you had a secret room in your
right,
apartment, a hiding place.
Right. We were lucky. It was random luck that we were not found. But we never heard from the people, right, who were wrenched from us. Some came back miraculously. They somehow survived. And they came back and they told us about these horrendous train rides, right, that took the people to a place called Treblinka, where people were gassed. It is so impossible to believe that people who had mothers, who have children, who had brothers could do such things to people. And this is one of the reasons why I share my story.
Well, I have a minute left with you, and this is, I think, the most important question. A lot of things that we wrestle with personally and as a society is getting over trauma.
Yes.
People who've been abused, perhaps, or whatever, things in our own lives we struggle, yes, with.
Yes.
You were a witness to the greatest crime in human history.
Yes.
How have you been able to go on with your life, obviously successfully and fruitfully?
Yes.
You seem like a very nice person who doesn't.
Thank you.
So how do you reconcile what you saw, what your family went through, with going on with your day?
I don't. You asked me earlier about hope. In Majdanek, where the gas chamber was, yeah, within sight, where the sky was covered with smoke, smelling of our people, and where there was there was no hope. But I think that there is a human current in us that wants to live and demands to live and has a right to live. And it's sort of a dignity. And I think that current must be what made us feel grateful. No, not grateful. I'm grateful now for the rising, to see the rising sun. Right. All I can say that the basal instinct to live, that we all have a right to, and we all, like my mother said, it's noble to fight to stay alive. I think that that I had wonderful role models. In my book, you'll read about Dr. Janusz Korczak. You will read about, I wished I had the time to, you'll read about the brave teachers who risked their lives to teach the children in secret rooms. You'll read about the fact that we had theaters when we had no bread. There was a famous writer in the ghetto and a historian. He said it is strange that when we don't seem to need it at all, we need poetry more than we need bread.
Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentlemen, Estelle Laughlin. Only a time more in her book, which will be available afterwards, and Estelle will be there to sign it. What a pleasure.
I am so honored.
A pleasure to talk to you.